President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has said former Vice President Atiku Abubakar will fail in his bid to unseat him, using last week's Tuesday's deposition over a degree he obtained from Chicago State University. Atiku had on Thursday addressed a press conference following the deposition made by the Chicago State University over the degree Mr. Tinubu obtained from the university in 1970.
In the deposition, we of course say that the university said President Tinubu did graduate from the university as he claimed. The university was, however, not categorical when asked if the certificate he submitted to the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, was forged. One man who flagged the issue of the alleged certificate forgery by President Tinubu was investigative journalist David Hundeyin back in November 2022. According to him, President Tinubu downloaded the fake certificate template and used it to design his own certificate, adding that the logo on the certificate Tinubu submitted to INEC has never been used by Chicago State University. As this conversation continues, the one big question that has somewhat remained unanswered is, did the president forge his certificate? Several answers. While the APC's answer to the question is no, the opposition People's Democratic Party disagrees, saying that the certificate submitted by President Tinubu to INEC was forged. To give us some clarity as to the amount of work that has been done behind the scenes is investigative journalist David Hundeyin. He joins us this morning. Thank you very much for joining us on the show, and good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. All
right. We, of course, would like you to first of all react to the conversation we had earlier. This morning, we're joined by Dr. Charles Marindoti, and we had asked him to react to the clip or the statement made by Alhaji Atiku Abubakar during his World Press Conference, first giving accolades to you and then stating that the work that Gani Fawehinmi started has now been completed and he can rest in peace. And this is exactly what he had to say.
Atiku mentioned Gani Fawehinmi. I'm pretty sure when Gani Fawehinmi heard Atiku mention his name, he turned in his grave over and over again, because I'm pretty sure he was pissed. This is the same Gani Fawehinmi that berated Obasanjo for allowing Atiku to cut away with Petroleum Development Fund in 2007. That is the same person that Atiku is trying to use for credence gathering. It doesn't make any sense. And this remedial journalist David Hundeyin that you spoke about, as backward as he is, I thank him for the job he has done, because you know what Atiku and Tinubu, and Hundeyin have done is that they've helped Asiwaju validate his records.
Well, I'm sure you indeed got that. He said, as backward as David Hundeyin is, that what you simply did was to make it easier for Tinubu to actually be crowned, in quotes, winner and victor of the elections.
I must add also that at the end of the interview, he did applaud you and tell you thank you and well done for helping to give them some clarity and maybe sort of validating their work. So please react.
Well, first of all, with regard to me being backward, well, if the standard for being backward is the things that I've done in my career, then I'm sure Mr. Marindoti and his family would love to be backward, because I'm known around the world. I'm sure nobody knows him outside of Nigeria. So the less said about that, the better. Now, regarding the actual meat of the issue, once again, I think it's very important that anyone who either wants to offer an opinion on this in public or do an analysis or whatever should actually read the deposition and not read analysis of what people said the deposition said. It's there, it's 100 and something pages, but sit down with it for a couple of hours, you will get through it. First of all, I have to correct you. You said earlier that the university was not categorical in stating whether the certificate was forged. Well, in legal terms, that was as categorical as you can get, because Caleb Westberg, the registrar of Chicago State University, was asked under oath multiple times. This INEC diploma, this diploma submitted to INEC, did it emanate from Chicago State University or not? Is it you or not? And multiple times he gave the same answer. No, we did not issue this diploma. That is as categorical as you can get, because if Chicago State University did not issue a diploma which purports to be from Chicago State University, then what can that possibly mean? That only means one thing: it's a forgery. And as you rightly said, as far back as November last year, I had already done a forensic examination of where exactly this certificate came from, how he got hold of it. I mean, this has been in the public domain for almost a year, right? In fact, as I'm sure you're aware, if you take a hike around, Twitter, social media right now, you're going to see dozens of people with almost identical certificate templates, designed in funny ways. So you'll see Chicago State University, under the authority of blah blah blah, awards you a degree in shoe shining, blah blah blah, and then the person's name. That's because you can go to this platform and other platforms like it and design this thing, right? I put this out as far back as last year, and Caleb Westberg couldn't have been more categorical. He was asked under oath, did this emanate from Chicago State University or not? Did you issue this certificate or not? He said, no, we did not. So again, if anyone feels the need to offer a defense of Tinubu, like, this is pretty much indefensible, but if you're trying to offer a defense, I think the first thing you can do is at least read the thing that you are trying to base your defense on, so that you don't, because I don't think I've spent up to 2 minutes completely deconstructing the entire argument. I need more of a challenge, to be honest. So people should actually read this thing before reacting to it or offering opinions based on it.
I would like you to also, maybe respond to those who make reference to the argument about third parties issuing certificates has also come up, and there have been conversations about that. I would like you to maybe talk to us and shed some more light on the possibility of third parties having issued this certificate and what that would have meant rather.
First of all, I should mention that the idea that third parties issue certificates is nonsense. It's not true. A third party, in some instances, at some universities in the US, is able to deliver a certificate to someone who orders it based on authorization from the university. So it's not as if the university awards its franchise to some unspecified third party, and then that third party is free at will to go around awarding certificates that the university doesn't have a record of. That's not how it works, right? So if you are ordering from a third-party supplier, there's going to be a record with the university to say that you placed this order. The only thing is that the university itself is not the entity printing it. There's a third-party entity that prints it. So the university then forwards that order to the third party, and then you receive it from them. That's what third-party order means. It doesn't mean that the third party is awarding you a certificate. Secondly, and more importantly, Chicago State University does not make use of third parties. Chicago State University issues its own certificates itself. This was also stated under oath in the deposition. So again, I feel as if there is this very coordinated attempt to insult everybody's intelligence. There's this attempt to take advantage of people's laziness, because the people who are in power know that most Nigerians cannot sit down to read 100 and something pages. They're too lazy to do it. So someone will just pluck a narrative out of thin air and start throwing it around, talking about that. There is nothing like third party in this instance. Chicago State University makes no use of third parties in its it issues its certificates itself. Full stop. This was stated under oath. So if there's a third party here, then that means that third party is a forgery service. It's as simple as that.
But anyway, in line with all of this, if you go on social media, a lot of people have actually followed your statements, looking at the points that you raised after the deposition was indeed released. What's in it for you? Because that's one of the questions everyone is asking. What's in it for David Hundeyin, who has spent countless hours, possibly resources, money, to ensure that he digs deeper to find answers to questions many Nigerians are asking?
So what's in it for me? First of all, I kind of resent that question every time I'm asked, because it implies that the only possible reason that a journalist would go over and above while doing his job is because there's some sort of personal grudge or some expectation of reward at the end of it. I am someone who takes a lot of pride in my work. That's where it starts from. So if I'm doing public interest journalism, I don't think there's a bigger public interest story to pursue than the fact of the president, for example, having been involved in drug trafficking, or the president being someone who has submitted fake forged certificates to the Electoral Commission. I don't think there's a bigger public interest story than that. So I think if you're someone who takes pride in your work, who genuinely believes in the power of what you do, and who respects your job, I don't think there's a more important story for you to pursue. That's how I think of my job. I think part of the problem here is that a lot of people specifically in the print space, in the legacy Nigerian journalism space, people who happen to be much older than I am, based on their experience with the military administrations and then going into the early parts of the civilian era from 1999, they have this idea of what journalism should be. And they are yet to update themselves on the reality that the world has changed. The world now is a completely unrecognizable place to what it was 20 or 30 years ago when they were in their prime. So it's possible for one person now to take ownership of a story, to take charge of it from end to end, and to pursue it in ways that it couldn't be pursued before. For example, in 1999, when Ganifa was pursuing this very issue, there was no internet in Nigeria except for a very privileged few, maybe 100,000 plus people. There was no MTN, there was no Airtel, there was no Glo, there was no Etisola, there was nothing. People had zero access to information except what was presented to them in the broadcast media, which was censored by the government, and what was presented to them in the print media, which was also censored by the government. There was very little way to access information except you write official letters to this and that, and the time delays involved made information gathering very impractical. Nowadays, you can go to a website. So, for example, on the 1999 affidavit sworn by Bola Tinubu, where he claimed that he earned a degree at the University of Chicago and another degree at Chicago State University, and then became a certified public accountant. You can go to cpaverify.org, type in his surname to see whether there's anybody in the US who is a certified public accountant with that name. And it shows you very, very clearly that he was lying. There's no such person. You couldn't do that in 1999. So I think the people who say what's in it for me are people who are yet to understand that the world has changed, and are people who don't really respect the work that journalism represents. They think that journalism is a ladder. Maybe the only reason you pursue a story as a journalist is because you are looking for favors, or you are looking for an appointment. I've actually heard someone say that a documentary that I produced last year, that I was paid 50 million naira by Atiku Abubakar to do the documentary. Atiku Abubakar is someone I have never spoken to in my life. In fact, the first time, to the best of my knowledge, that he had ever made any reference to me whatsoever was when he mentioned my name on live TV last week. And yet, I'm being accused of being somehow on his payroll. I'm expecting something from him. Some other people accuse me of working for Peter Obi. I'm on Peter Obi's payroll. Depending on which story I'm working on, I'm always on somebody's payroll. It genuinely doesn't occur to certain people that there is a type of journalist in the 21st century who doesn't need to be on anybody's payroll, right? Who has an independent source of income, a strong source of income, and who can do stories simply based on the fact that he wants to do them, and there's nothing you can do about it. The world is different now. So I think people need to understand that the world has changed, and that the expectations of journalists or whoever that they had in 1999 or in 1996 are not the same as they're going to be in 2023, and people just need to get used to that reality.
All right, David. I think you finally put that question to rest. Like I rightly said, it's one question that many have asked, and with your answers, I think to all our viewers, everyone watching, they do know your stand, and hopefully such question would not be asked anymore. But let's go straight to one question I want to ask. During the deposition, you also posted that this is where the facts and the points were made, so on, especially with the social security number and, of course, the gender. Why is this very key to the deposition, and why are many people holding on to that? Because we did have, like the guest who joined us in the morning, he said there was a typographical error in all of that.
Well, why it's important is that if you read through the deposition, Caleb Westberg was asked multiple times, can you categorically confirm that this person you have on file by the name of Bola A. Tinubu is the same person as Nigeria's president? And his answer every single time was, yes, I can confirm that based on the fact that we have a transcript for somebody called Bola A. Tinubu. And then Angela Liu, Atiku's lawyer, then asked him further, so are you then saying that Chicago State University is merely making an assumption that because there is somebody on file with a similar name to the person who is Nigeria's president, that means that they are the same person? And his answer was, that is correct. Keyword, assumption. Because again, if you read through the deposition and if you read through the case files, it also becomes clear that Chicago State University claims that they have no identifying information whatsoever to identify the actual person known as Bola A Tinubu on their file. So there's no passport data page, there's no driver's license, there's no passport photo, there's no visual ID, which I think all of us having this conversation, we all went to university or some tertiary institution of some description, and we all know how incredible that sounds to us. Because even if you go to some federal polytechnic in Gusau, for you to get admission there, I'm sure they will take your some sort of visual record of you to prove that this is the person that we have on file, as compared to whoever it is who will later show up claiming to be that person. Yet Chicago State University essentially claims that because they have a transcript for somebody named Bola A Tinubu, and that there is somebody who is now Nigeria's president going by the name of Bola Ahmed Tinubu, who claims to have attended Chicago State University around the same time as the person they have on file, that therefore means that they are the same person. Now, there are two major problems with this. The first problem is that what it potentially means is that Nigeria's president, person sitting in the top office of the land, potentially has committed identity theft, identity fraud. I'm not sure I need to explain why that is a big problem. For the reputation of Nigeria, even for the national security of Nigerians, I'm sure that's self-explanatory. The second issue is that what Chicago State University claims essentially means that all I need to do is I need to look up the names of people who maybe graduated from Chicago State University at any point in time, maybe 1986, and then I go do a legal change of name. I assume one of their names, right? And then I go to Chicago State University and I will order a certificate that belongs to that dead person, right? And they will say that, well, since my name matches the name of that person and I claim to have graduated the same year as that person, that therefore means that we are the same person. Since they have no way of visually verifying that I am in fact the same person that I claim to be, since they say they have no driver's license, no passport data page, no passport photograph, no sort of visual identification, which sounds absolutely incredible to me. So something else, I think the final thing I'll mention here is that a criminal investigation has actually kicked off at Chicago State University, because the authorities in the US themselves have seen this exact same picture, that at the very least, even if we're not talking about a criminal conspiracy here, at the very least, there is criminal negligence here in terms of data handling. So I think the issues here should be self-explanatory. Again, people should read this deposition. Stop listening to what David Hundeyin said, the deposition said, or what somebody said it said. Go and read it for yourself. It's available on the internet.
I mean, you've just mentioned clinical negligence there, or clerical or criminal negligence, I beg your pardon. When we had Dr. Marindoti earlier today, and even when we had Felix Moka, the National Publicity Secretary for the All Progressives Congress, the one thing they kept highlighting was that these are probably typographical errors, made reference to the fact that some people in Nigeria here can attest to the fact that on their driver's license or certain documents, there's been some typographical error where a male is being referred to as a female, and to be able to adjust this, some people would then have to do an affidavit explaining this. What would be your response to that? Also, we did have, this is a twofold question. Also, we had Dr. Osita Okechukwu, who is the DG of The Voice Nigeria and one of the founding members of the All Progressives Congress, on the show. And when we asked him categorically, did the president forge his certificate? His response was that we should allow the president, we should not tamper with Nigeria's democracy. He went further to say that we should allow the president his time in office, and if we're not comfortable with it, we can vote him out in 4 years, and said that what we're doing is we're sort of heating up the polity. So I'd like you to respond to this twofold question. One, of course, to those who say it was a clerical mistake, and the other one to those who say that we're heating up the polity by having these conversations.
Okay, so first of all, assuming there was a clerical error on the documents used to admit this person known as Bola A Tinubu to Chicago State University, I think the obvious thing is that as an administrator or as an administrative personnel at the university, when you notice that there is this obvious disparity between, for example, the gender of the person you admitted and the gender of the person who is actually there, this is an error that should be sorted out immediately. This is not something that will now come out 40 years later. And you didn't even come out. An independent journalist and a public interest litigator basically dragged it out of you 40 plus years later, right? 43 years later. And then you're now like, oh yeah, this should have been a mistake. We have no way of knowing whether it was a mistake or not because we don't keep records and we don't actually know. So based on the fact that this name appears here and this person appears here who claims to have the same name and claims to have graduated in the same year, therefore we are going to assume that they are the same person, right? You can't make assumptions like that. So this was stated clearly in the position that he was asked. So you are saying that the idea that Bola A. Tinubu on record and Bola Ahmed Tinubu, Nigeria's president, are the same person is purely based on your assumption, and he says that is correct. So it's an assumption. So again, there is no way of knowing whether this is true or not. So putting aside Tinubu for a second, this means that Chicago State University itself, at the very least, is an extremely incompetent institution. And I say at the very least because the criminal investigation has actually kicked off at Chicago State University. And I'm fairly certain that some people are going to end up in prison at the end of all of this. Now, regarding what Osita Okechukwu said, well, I guess to a man who is trying, there's a proverb that I'm trying to remember the exact wording, but it goes something along the lines of, if somebody's livelihood depends on him not understanding something, he's never going to understand. So there's no kind of obtuse, fatuous argument that certain people will not make if it's going to help them, protect their source of income, their job. Obviously, he works for the government. Obviously, if Tinubu sneezes today, he can lose that job. So what else is he going to say? He's not going to say something, reasonable. He's going to say, he's basically performing on TV, so he can be noticed by his boss. Right? Your boys are loyal. Your boys are protecting you. Because I mean, if you say that what you are doing is as the DJ of Vaughan, you are going after journalists. You are criticizing journalists and criticizing opposition lawyers and activists and politicians for doing something which is objectively in the public interest. Then, I mean, are you being serious? What could be a bigger public interest story than establishing that the person who is sitting in the office of the president is not who he claims to be? Is that not a national security problem? Is that not a reputational problem for Nigeria, a country that is already affected with several reputational problems? So when you then say that by sweeping it under the carpet, you are protecting Nigeria's democracy, are you really? Or are you in fact doing the opposite? And then you then say that if you don't like him, vote him out. Who said anything about voting? So he's giving himself away by saying that, because the issue here is not even did he win election, did he not win election. Obviously, we have our opinions about that, but that's not even in the question here. The question is a simple question of law. It states very clearly in the Nigerian Constitution that anyone who aspires to hold the office of president shall not be qualified to hold that office if he has submitted a forged certificate to INEC. Simple and short. So what Osita Okechukwu and people like him should be concerned about is that did their boss in fact submit a forged certificate to INEC or not? Right? So if they're going to offer a defense, their defense should be that the certificate wasn't forged, and then they should prove it. Right. Their defense shouldn't be that we shouldn't talk about it. That's nonsensical. He has no right to tell us what we should and shouldn't talk about. He's not an emperor.
So, David, how do you foresee that all of this is going to play out? First, the impact that this would have on Nigerians and Nigeria's reputation, in the diaspora, and also what the Supreme Court will make of this. As it stands, this is a matter that is still under investigation. Alhaji Atiku Abubakar has presented fresh facts, and we want to know exactly, what are your expectations from the Supreme Court? I think that would be it.
So if history is any guide, I fully expect that the Supreme Court or the Supreme Court panel, the members of the Supreme Court panel are going to be looking for every and any possible way, including the famous technicalities, to find a way to put the kibosh on this. However, what is also true is that I think, legally speaking, the Atiku's legal team in the US has done a stellar job. If you read through that deposition, I think they did a very good job of closing off all the available loopholes. So, legally speaking, I'm not sure there's any technicality that can be deployed. So, if history is any guide, or at least recent history, going by what happened in the appeal court, What I expect will happen will be either of two things. Scenario one is that Nigerians as a whole, the generality of Nigerians, will make their voices very clear and make it impossible for the justices to say that 2 plus 2 is 9. Because what happened in the appeal court was basically that 2 plus 2 was 9, and there was no public response, there was no public reaction, so they got away with it. Because Nigeria is not a country that functions on laws or rules or processes. Nigeria is a country that functions on noise and narrative. So if the noise and the narrative are at a level that makes it possible for the justices to get away with it, then they will get away with it. And obviously, if the noise and narrative are not in their favor, then it's going to be out of their hands. It's going to be beyond them. The second scenario is that they will simply decide that regardless of what the public thinks or does not think, we are going to give the judgment that we want to give. Obviously, we know the judgment they want to give. They have not the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, Kayode Ariwoola, came out a few days ago and made a statement which was, I mean, as far as I was concerned, that was a blatant statement of intent. It was like a manifesto. Speaking to the justices of the Supreme Court, he said the law supersedes public opinion. So it's obvious what he was trying to say. That even if the public consensus is that this person forged a certificate, based on whatever technicalities we're able to dig up, your remit is to deliver on this mandate. Right? That's how I interpreted it, and that's how I think everybody interpreted it as well. So I think it's very clear what the Supreme Court wants to do. I think the Supreme Court does not want to disqualify Tinubu, but in this second scenario where they decide to fly in the face of public opinion, well, I know I understand that you guys are regulated by the NBC, so there's a limit to what I can say on air. But let's just say that it's not going to end well for all of us, and I think I'll just leave it at that.
All right, David, I want to say thank you so much for speaking with us. Before we let you go, please, very shortly, you had put up a post that there are plans to bring you out from where you are now back to Nigeria to indeed face the law based on the work that you have been doing. Can you touch on that very briefly?
Right. So, as you know, I fled Nigeria in 2020. I claimed political asylum in Ghana, which I think is public knowledge now. In 2021, I gained full refugee status in Ghana in 2022, and I currently use a Ghanaian passport to travel. So in August, I happened to be in Ghana at the time, and that was around the time when there was this thing about Nigeria potentially going to war with Niger, and a lot of people in the military chain of command were not at all on board with this, and the attack plans were leaked to me. I guess because they knew that I would put it out, which is exactly what I did. And putting it out actually stopped that initial planned invasion, the illegal deployment of special forces into Niger. However, I guess at the very highest level, that made me an enemy of state, because then I was accused of treason. And following the unfortunate incident I had in Zimbabwe, where it then became exposed to the world that I travel with a Ghanaian passport and I have refugee status in Ghana, the Nigerian authorities then reached out to the Ghanaian authorities, trying to lean on them to have my asylum status revoked and to have my passport revoked. And why that would have been a problem for me is that whether or not they were able to physically get hold of me, the fact that I used a Ghanaian passport would have basically rendered my ability to travel, because I traveled a lot, it would have rendered me, stuck in one place, which would have been a big problem for me. That's what they're trying to do. In fact, I was reliably informed a jet was actually dispatched from Abuja to Accra with plainclothes agents of the National Intelligence Agency on board. Whether those people had any intention of kidnapping me or whatever, I cannot say for certain, but I'm telling you what happened. And I was given this information and I had to leave where I was with like hours to spare. So then I put out that video that I'm sure you must have seen. I put out an appeal. I was actually reassured by the Ghanaian authorities that they will continue to do their best to take care of me, to protect me. So, and then I think about a week later, I was also able to speak to the UN Human Rights Council to basically give more voice to my situation. So that's the current state of affairs. The Nigerian state is obviously not pleased with the fact that there exists a journalist with a big platform in Nigeria who is not subject to the regulatory whims and caprices of the NBC or whoever. So that's how come they're making these moves. But
All right.
well, it comes with the territory.
All right, David, our time is up. I want to say thank you so much for joining us here. Well, so far, so good. We'll look forward to get more information. And as usual, on News Central and Breakfast Central, we always ensure that we bring a balance to every story. We spoke to a member, someone from the APC. We've spoken to you as well. We've spoken to almost everybody from all political parties. And most importantly, everybody that represents the government. But thank you so much.
And I'll just
for
quickly
joining us.
add that, David, if you would oblige us, would like to ask that you come back again, and maybe this time we can look into the meat of the deposition with a member of the All Progressives Congress. All right. Thank you very much for joining us. We're going on a quick break, and when we return,